y con todo gusto les damos mayor información en el stand de Centro Fox. Bienvenidos y muchas gracias.
Gracias, Ingrid. Bueno, les recuerdo que están los libros de muchos de los ponentes que están el día de hoy aquí y el día de ayer estuvieron con nosotros, los participantes de CITEK 2015. Sus libros están disponibles en la expo y muchos de los autores podrán firmárselos si a ustedes les interesa. La señora Marta Sagún.
Hola, buenos días. No quiero repetir lo felices que estamos porque están todos ustedes aquí con nosotros. Muy bienvenidos. Por favor, recorran los stands. Muchas gracias a nuestros patrocinadores. Yo solamente les quiero recordar, esto es una asociación civil. Centro Fox es un centro sin fines de lucro, abierto, universal, plural, para todas las ideologías, para todas las religiones. Simplemente nosotros, nuestra misión es hacer el bien y poder abrir oportunidades a los que menos tienen. En ese sentido y de manera muy concreta les quiero invitar a que pasen a visitar el stand de Centro Fox y de la Fundación Vamos México, y en lo particular para el programa de Crisma, donde atendemos a 200 niños y adultos con daño cerebral en San Miguel de Allende, donde les atendemos de manera absolutamente gratuita. Estamos creando el Mural de la Esperanza. El Mural de la Esperanza tiene que ver con reunir 2,000 ladrillitos, 2,000 talaveritas, que cada una de ellas nos cuesta 500 pesos. En cada talaverita, en cada ladrillito va a ir puesto el nombre de quien hace posible que el Mural de la Esperanza para estos enfermos sin recursos. Un chiquito de ellos antes caminaba con su mamá, ella lo traía en brazos 7 horas y por lo tanto solamente podía venir al centro 2 días por semana para poder tener su rehabilitación. Ahora ya mandamos por él, ya mandamos por su mamá, ya puede venir todos los días. Y así les puedo contar muchas historias de vida que verdaderamente llegan, tocan el corazón, pero que gracias a la generosidad de personas como están aquí, hacen posible que nos vayamos haciendo de más recursos y poderles atender mucho mejor. Así es de que si alguno de ustedes, y yo sé que son muchos, tienen esa generosidad, 500 pesitos donde su nombre estará ahí puesto y recordado por siempre y para siempre en el corazón de muchas personitas que no tienen nada y que un poquito hace la diferencia de sus propias vidas. Pasen por favor al stand de Crisma, de la Fundación Vamos México, del Centro Fox. Les ponemos ahí en su ladrillito su nombre y le recordaremos por siempre, esas familias le recordarán por siempre que ustedes pudieron hacer la diferencia en la vida no solamente de una persona, sino en la vida de su propia familia. Y sobre todo, quienes lo han experimentado y por eso lo creen, hace nuestra diferencia en nuestras propias vidas. Dar un poquito, ser para los demás, es lo que verdaderamente nos lleva a nuestra verdadera felicidad. Así es de que por ahí buscan el stand, a la entrada, de aquí para allá mano izquierda, de venida mano derecha, Crisma, grandotote, y formen parte del Mural de la Esperanza. Muchas gracias, Dios los bendiga.
Gracias, señora Fox. Bueno, pues continuamos con el siguiente panel, el panel número 6 de CITEK 2015. Los retos del sector energético. A partir de la reforma energética, México enfrenta grandes retos para asegurar los insumos energéticos que necesita para su continuo desarrollo. Se abren grandes oportunidades para las empresas de exploración y producción energética. En esta sesión, los expertos se enfocarán a presentar los retos y oportunidades que se abren para el sector de la energía en nuestro país. Y les pido que le demos la bienvenida a Wallace Pescarini, quien es el presidente de la Schlumberger para México y Centroamérica, el señor Wallace Pescarini.
Buenos días. Buenos días a todos. Antes de más nada, gostaria de agradecer al presidente Fox y la señora Fox por la invitación. Y quería decir que es muy especial para mí estar acá. Yo empecé mi carrera en Schlumberger internacionalmente aquí en México hace 15 años y apenas estoy de regreso en este momento muy excitante aquí en el país. So I would like to switch to English now. And today I have been invited here to talk about the challenge of the oil and gas industry here in Mexico. So since this forum is beyond the oil sector, I'll take some time to give a presentation about Schlumberger. Please, if you can move the slide. Yeah, this is just the protocol. Next one. Thank you very much. So basically, since this forum goes beyond the oil and gas sector, I'll take the opportunity in the beginning just to give a flavor that what Schlumberger at global level and what Schlumberger here in Mexico, and how this history of Schlumberger worldwide is very tight and mixed with the story of the hydrocarbons here in Mexico. Second, I'll talk about the industry challenge and some of the Mexicans' opportunities that is showing up now with the energy reform. And finally, with this challenge and the opportunities, the need for the industry to transform themselves. We have seen the oil price going down more than 50% from last year, and there is a strict requirement for everybody to focus on the transformation of the industry and how can you operate in this level of pricing. And I'll share some final thoughts that can leave some statements for you guys to basically to make some questions. Before I start, as I said, I'd like to give a flavor of Schlumberger. And in these 2 days here in León, I have been amazed with the importance to come back to our roots. So I would like to combine the startup of Schlumberger in 1919 in France, when basically Paul Schlumberger funded their 2 sons with 500 French francs to start up a business to measure electromagnetic waves in the subsurface. So this was the start of everything. Today Schlumberger is a big conglomerate, is the oil field service leader in the market with more than $40 billion revenue per year. And we operate in more than 140 countries, not different here from Mexico. And we have more than 100,000 employees operating worldwide. We are split in 3 main divisions. One focus on the characterization of the reservoirs, the second one on the drilling side, that's basically the well construction, and finally on the production. And just last month, we have announced that our expansion to the surface production with the acquisition of Cameroon, which still underpinning for final approval, but we are expanding our portfolio even further. We have worldwide about 125 research and engineer centers, and we have 3 of them here in Mexico. One in Mexico City, where we have a regional technology center, a manufacturing center in Monterrey, and a center of reliability in Veracruz. Our history mixed with the history of Schlumberger in Mexico. And believe it or not, we have been here even before Pemex. We logged the first well in Mexico in 1936, and Pemex was created in 1938. So we have been operating for almost 8 years, continuous in Mexico. We have today 4,000 employees. 20% of these employees are female, and despite of all these employees here in Mexico, we still have another 400 employees, Mexicans, working abroad, getting experience to basically to come back one day to provide support to our operation here. We could not spend all this time in Mexico without engaging with the community. We have a very strong social program here in Mexico that's focused on education, where we promote internet connectivity and computers to low-income schools close to the community where we work for. So this already covers 13 schools and more than 15,000 students, and we have this program for the last 10 years. So, since now you're expert in Schlumberger worldwide and Schlumberger Mexico, let's talk about the industry challenge. This chart is very interesting. It shows the E&P, exploration and production budget or investment in the last 13 years. And you can see that we move from the range of $150 billion of investment per year worldwide to up to 700, basically multiplied by 6. Despite of all this investment increase, we have seen a very little increase on the production. And as the demand goes a little bit up, we have been kept a very tight supply and demand balance. In the last year, we have seen a little bit a large gap, and basically this is the main reason that made the price collapse. However, we never seen in the industry in the last 30 years a so deep de-investment in the oil and gas sector. So definitely, consequently, we should expect a big impact on the supply on the upcoming months or upcoming years. So why the cost has increased so much and basically has not impacted the production? Basically, the complexity of the new developments are much larger with deep water, and as we just discussed about the shale gas and shale oil, is an activity that demands a very large and intensive activity in the drilling side. This is escalating the capital intensity, and basically today 1/3 of the investment is just to replace the production decline of the natural reservoirs. So from now to 2020, we need to replace 1/3 of the current production just because of the natural decline. So Mexico is not different of that, but Mexico presents several opportunities that we are ready to tackle, and we have been here for all this time, and we have a deep knowledge of the different reservoirs in Mexico. What Mexico will require in the upcoming years is capital investment. As we have seen this morning, looks like we have a lot of volunteers to invest the capital here and should be extremely welcome. Reservoir knowledge. The Mexican geological is not as simple as everybody thinks. We have certain complexity the same that we have seen in Gulf of Mexico and in some part of south of the US, but even more than that, we have seen environments of high pressure, high temperature, and high HOS environments that is quite challenging for the oil and gas industry and basically drive the cost even up. So what we need is basically efficient execution to tackle of all this to make sure that we get the best production out of this investment. So how Schlumberger is tackling that? So basically it's very clear that we need to go through a completely transformation. And this is not just specific to Mexico, it's worldwide. To operate in the levels of oil and gas price at this $50 or $40 a barrel, we need to transform ourselves, and we have been leading the transformation in the industry. This transformation is based in 4 main pillars: technology, reliability, efficiency, and integration. Today, mainly because of the audience in this forum, let's talk a little bit about technology. So, one thing, as I showed since in the beginning, the investment in research engineer is in our DNA, is in our core of our foundation, since we started the company in the day one. So you can see in this chart our investment in R&E, that since the years of 2002 has increased systematically up to reach levels of $1.2 billion per year. So you can see as well that despite of some hiccups on the revenue side, mainly driven by downturns, we have kept our investment in R&E consistently and steadily growing. So this R&E is based in 4 main pillars: technology, mergers and acquisitions, and we have been targeting since from startups up to big companies, like I just announced about our intention to acquire Cameron. Second, our relation with the universities. We have been located our research centers close to the clusters of the universities. And this is the same that we have done here in Mexico as well. The oil and gas industry collaboration. We collaborate with some of our customers, And we have several projects on research and development to work on with Pemex and other customers as well, mainly to tackle the regional challenges that we have. And finally, we collaborate with other industries, different than oil and gas. Because of this forum, I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on the collaboration of the external industry. So, since few years, we have been really focused to learn and collaborate with them. Mainly the aerospace industry, the automotive industry, and the biotechnical industry. On the aerospace side, we have been mainly interested for new materials and for materials that consist of with some sensors that provides data for us in real time to basically to predict failure mode. On the automotive side is a very similar as well. If you take a Formula 1 car or the new vehicles, you have an extremely high level of acquisition of data that can be processed in real time to adjust the behavior. And finally, on the biotechnology industry, we have demonstrated a lot of interest for micro and nano components that has been discovered that can be applied in the reservoirs. I'd like to show an example of one of these applications of one of the technologies here in Mexico that is started basically in the biotechnology industry and the automotive industry. Today, we are performing the biggest offshore multi-client seismic survey in Campeche Bay in Mexico. This is basically to support the energy reform and to eliminate some of the reservoir uncertainties that we have. One of the technologies that we are applying here in Mexico is the latest one called isometrics. And basically, in a very human, normal industry terms, is like between the difference between to take an X-ray or to take a completely scanner from the reservoir. On the top side, you can see the old technology called conventional, that when the seismic is shooted with a vessel offshore, you can see just some very brief data of the reservoir. So with the new systems called isometrics, where we have 100 times more channels of acquisition of data and extremely heavy data processing capacity, you can completely scan the reservoir. So you are seeing in the top square and the below square exactly the same section of the reservoir. In the below one, you can identify very clear where you may have a hydrocarbon accumulation and minimize the cost and de-risk the operation of offshore. So what's the final thought? Basically, our 8 years in Mexico provides unmatched knowledge for the oil and gas challenge of the market. The industry transformation is required to meet the energy sector challenge. Mexico today has a unique opportunity to be the engine of this transformation. This transformation will be driven by technology, reliability, efficiency, and integration. And I can assure to you that after 8 years here in Mexico, Schlumberger has innovation and technology in our DNA, and we are ready for the challenge of the energy reform in Mexico. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Wallace Pescarini. A continuación, voy a invitar a que pase aquí al podio al señor Bill Black.
Thank you all for having me here today. I'm sure you're wondering, what in the world is the Railroad Commission? Let me tell you, I'll try to be brief about this. It's a regulatory agency in Texas. It consists of 3 elected officials. Commissioner Craddock, who I work for, is one of the 3 elected officials. The Railroad Commission currently has about 750 employees on staff. And in 2016, the Commission will be celebrating its 125th anniversary. Among other things, it oversees oil and gas exploration and production in Texas. Thank you. Commissioner Craddock regrets that her schedule would not allow her to attend and speak to you today. But let me tell you how that came about. Juan Garcia, on President Fox's staff, actually came to Austin to Commissioner Craddock's office and asked her to come speak at CITEK. And I was present at the meeting. When we were planning her schedule, it turned out that she wasn't able to attend. She had a scheduling conflict, so she said, "You go." So that's why I'm here. I'm her chief of staff and legal counsel, but thank you, President Fox, for allowing me to be here on her behalf. I had a conference call several weeks ago with Juan on President Fox's staff, inquiring about various matters related to the conference. President Fox actually got on the line as I was speaking with Juan, and I asked President Fox what he wanted me to talk about today, and he said right off the bat, "Good stories." He then went on to be more specific, but I think I'll start with what I think is a good story. Commissioner Craddock is fond of saying publicly that what starts in Texas changes the world. And I'll tell you why she says that. And it's not simply because she's a University of Texas graduate, but she believes that institution has also contributed to world-changing technologies. When I first got out of school in the late 70s, I actually worked on the staff at the Railroad Commission as a hearings examiner. We now call them administrative law judges. But this was in the dark ages compared to what we're in now. And that was before the advent of horizontal drilling, so Texas operators were drilling vertical wells. I remember at that time hearing and learning about an oil and gas field in North Texas, in particular in Wise County near Fort Worth, called the Boonesville Field, which is about a mile deep. I think it starts at around 4,900 feet subsurface. In any event, my memory tells me that Mitchell Energy was probably the biggest operator in the Boonesville field. The founder of that company was George Mitchell, and that was the same George Mitchell that ultimately found a way to utilize horizontal well technology with fracture stimulation to recover hydrocarbons from tight shale formations. His story is one of great perseverance. Here's what happened. In 1982, George Mitchell became obsessed with using the fracking technique to tap the Barnett Shale, something that hadn't been done before. The Barnett Shale underlay the Boonesville field where Mr. Mitchell had been operating for years drilling vertical wells. He dubbed the first Barnett Shale wells as experimental, not as failures. He was an optimistic guy. For 16 years, none of the Barnett Shale wells were economical. And not until 1998 did Mr. Mitchell have success with the Barnett Shale horizontal well. That's when he proved that you can pump into shale and make the shale productive. Devon Energy, based in Oklahoma City, where Mr. McClendon, who you heard from earlier, is from, took that concept and ran with it. They bought out Mitchell Energy, and they began drilling horizontal wells that tapped the shale more effectively. It is George Mitchell's technology that started the shale revolution, which has spread across the world. American oil producers have experienced game-changing growth as this technology has unlocked oil reserves considered undevelopable just 10 years ago. In 2008, the United States peaked as an oil importer, importing 60% of its oil. Today, the U.S. imports 40% of its crude. Let me talk for a minute about Texas production. Today, Texas energy production is big, with production numbers remaining high. Not only does Texas remain the #1 oil and gas producer in the United States with more than 274,000 oil and gas wells as of September 2015. Texas has a stellar environmental and public safety record. while fostering a job-creating industry that is immensely important to the Texas and the U.S. economies. Texas specifically presents a strong case to use energy production as a solution for long-term goals of energy security. Our production levels should level out this year and remain at a higher level compared to what they were 3 decades ago. America's competitiveness in the world's oil market and independence from OPEC is being led by Texas production and, more importantly, proper regulation of that production. 2014 production levels have not been seen in Texas since 1972. In 2014, the Commission processed more than 25,000 drilling permits. We processed more than 29,000 completion reports. Let me now turn to regional production within our state. While East Texas and the Granite Wash Formation in the Texas Panhandle in northwestern Texas are 2 long, consistent areas of oil production in Texas, the 3 most active areas of the state are the Barnett Shale, the Eagle Ford Shale, and the Permian Basin. Now, while rig counts are down compared to last year, production numbers in our state are still up. Let me start with the Barnett Shale. It's a natural gas play. The productive part of the formation is estimated to stretch from the city of Dallas west and south, covering 5,000 square miles and at least 18 counties. The rig count as of September 2015 in the Barnett Shale was 7. That's down from 8 last month. But again, production numbers show little decrease from 2014 to 2015. The Eagle Ford, which you've heard about, and which is of the most interest to Mexico because the Burgos Basin in northern Mexico is an extension of the Eagle Ford. The Eagle Ford is of significant importance due to its capability of producing both gas and more oil than other traditional shale plays. You'll remember I said the Barnett Shale is a gas play. The Eagle Ford produces oil, gas, and condensate, depending where you are in the formation. The Eagle Ford trends across southern Texas from the Mexican border up into East Texas, roughly 50 miles wide and 400 miles long, with an average thickness of about 250 feet. And it appears at a depth of approximately 4,000 feet subsurface down to 12,000 feet because it dips depending on where you are. The rig count in the Eagle Ford as of September 2015 was 90. That's down from 98 rigs last month. Here's what really puts it in perspective for the Eagle Ford. In 2008, the Railroad Commission issued 26 drilling permits for the Eagle Ford. 6 years later, in 2014, the Commission issued 5,613 drilling permits in the Eagle Ford. Let me now tell you a little about the Permian Basin. That's one of our oldest formations that's been around for a long time in our state. It produces oil and gas. It is located in West Texas and the adjoining area of southwestern New Mexico. The Permian Basin covers an area approximately 250 miles wide and 300 miles long. And here's the distinguishing factor about the Permian Basin. It contains at least 12 producing, and some say 14 producing formations, with oil and natural gas production ranging from depths from a few hundred feet to 5 miles below the surface. The Permian Basin has produced over 29 billion barrels of oil and 75 trillion cubic feet of gas, and is estimated by industry experts to contain recoverable oil and natural gas resources exceeding what has been produced over the last 90 years. I think there was a technology speaker yesterday that had a slide up that said, "You haven't seen anything yet." That applies to the Permian Basin. because of the stacked plays. The potential for the future is just enormous. Now, the recent increased use of enhanced recovery practices in the Permian has produced a substantial impact on U.S. oil production. Horizontal drilling and fracking came late to the Permian. The Permian has been around for a long time with vertical drilling, but horizontal wells and fracking are now the new reality in the Permian Basin. It contributes about 15% of total U.S. crude production today. The rig count in the Permian in September was 263, and that is actually up from 263 in September. Last month in August, it was at 203. Let me talk for a minute about the shale revolution's effect on the health of the economy in our state. The energy industry in Texas has recently been the #1 job creator in terms of jobs created and compensation. More than 2.2 million Texans have a job that is a result of oil and gas activity in our state. Direct industry jobs pay an average salary of about $120,000 a year. Let me give you a real-world example, because I'm an old guy, of how the energy industry has changed in Texas to the great benefit of our citizens. Again, I'm going to look back on my own experience. Long before this shale revolution began, I was actually researching ownership of a large ranch in South Texas for an oil and gas producer client in the courthouse in Cotulla, Texas, in South Texas. It took several days on this project, and I had folks with me, so I needed lodging, but there was no place to stay in Cotulla. The closest hotel was in Laredo, 60 miles to the south. Today, since it is in the middle of the Eagle Ford Shale, suffice it to say that I wouldn't have trouble finding lodging in Cotulla. The whole town has been transformed as a result of the Eagle Ford. Besides affecting individual communities, an active energy industry in Texas has also generated substantial revenue for our state coffers. The Texas oil and gas industry paid a record $15.7 billion in state and local taxes and royalties in 2014. That's the highest such collection from the oil and gas industry in Texas history. Even in years when oil and gas tax revenue does not make history, state and local tax revenue from the Texas oil and gas industry always makes a tremendous impact for our people. Let me now turn to some commission regulations and recent rules that we've had to deal with. First, I'd like to tell you what the Railroad Commission's mission statement is: to serve Texas by our stewardship of natural resources and the environment, our concern for personal and community safety, and support of enhanced development and economic vitality for the benefit of Texans. Sensible, business-minded regulation with a high standard for environmental safety has proven to allow business to flourish in our state. Now, while good regulatory rules foster growth, poorly conceived policies can actually stymie growth. And please keep that in mind here in Mexico as you move forward with your prospects here. In Texas, we know that free markets, economic growth, and environmental protection are not mutually exclusive. Economic growth provides the means to protect and care for the environment, and affordable energy is a vital contributor to that growth. Commissioner Craddock believes that when common sense policies are in place and the rules are sensibly applied at the state level, regulations should allow free markets to supply an abundance of affordable, reliable energy and a clean, healthy environment. I told you I was going to talk about some recent rules, and so the first one I want to mention is our casing rule. But before I do, I want to emphasize that the Commission has had regulatory rules in place for many, many years. But they were designed for what I'm going to refer to as a vertical world. With the recent advent of horizontal drilling, the Commission saw the importance of amending certain rules to ensure continued environmental protection and safety. The first one is our casing rule. It's a keystone of our rules. We amended this rule in May of 2013 to update standards for integrity testing for drilling, casing, cementing, well control, and completion requirements. We think it's the most stringent casing rule in the country. This new rule codifies best management practices in use by industry and applies to wells drilled after January 1 of 2014. We also have adopted or amended a recent recycling rule, and that's due to the increase due to the shale revolution. There's been a parallel increase in the use of water used for extraction purposes by the oil industry. Like it or not, the oil and gas industry and business is in many ways a water handling business. While the amount of water used in hydraulic fracturing operations has increased in Texas, the amount is proportionately small compared to other users. In 2010, water used for hydraulic fracturing represented 0.5% of the total water used statewide. On the other hand, irrigation accounts for only 56%, and municipal water requires 27% of water. I believe I'm about out of time, and I want to make this remark to you. Mexico's success in shale production relies on its regulatory development. The Commission has a sincere interest in working with our neighbor in helping it to develop strong regulatory oversight. In August 2014, we hosted a group of engineers and lawyers from Mexico's National Hydrocarbons Commission at a regulatory workshop in San Antonio, Texas. We look forward to providing further help to Mexico in the coming years in any way possible. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bill Black. Y a continuación quiero invitar a que haga uso de la palabra a Ann Itzel.
Hola, buenos días y mucho gusto al grupo, señor Presidente Fox, Primera Dama Fox. On behalf of Commissioner George P. Bush, I would like to extend his sincere regards and warmest thanks for inviting the Texas General Land Office to participate at CITEK 2015. It is an absolute honor and pleasure to be here. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank my fellow speakers as well as the prior panel. What the group has heard today in terms of an overview from an industry perspective, a government perspective, is really incomparable. You all have gotten a great sense of what is happening not just in Mexico, not just in Texas and the United States, but globally. So thank you for that, and I will also do my absolute best not to repeat too much of what has already been said. At first, I would like to provide you with a general overview and historical context of what it is that we do and who we are at the Texas General Land Office. First of all, we're the oldest state agency in Texas. We were created when the Republic of Texas was born in 1836 with the initial charge of granting deeds and patents to settlers who were coming to Texas to start their own businesses, settle their families for ranching and farming purposes, and otherwise seek out a new life in the Wild West. Consequently, and as a result of its history, Texas is a very pro-private property state. We have very little federal holdings in the state of Texas, and they're largely limited to the national parks. As a result, that which was not doled out to individuals and businesses in the past was retained by the great state of Texas. Consequently, we're the largest owner of state lands, holding and overseeing millions of acres in the great state of Texas, predominantly in West Texas, and overlaying, for the most part, the Permian Basin, which Bill just gave you a phenomenal overview of. Given that we are the largest state owner of property, we oversee a variety of classifications of state lands. And I won't go into the specifics, they're rather esoteric, but they're Relinquishment Act lands, public school fund lands, free royalty lands, and state fee lands. The Relinquishment Act lands are lands where we sold off our surface interest in those properties in the late 1800s, early 1900s, but retained the mineral interest. public school fund lands, any kind of oil and gas exploration and development, any of those revenues generated are paid into what is called the public school fund, which helps support public school education throughout the state of Texas. Consequently, because of our various ownership interests in lands throughout the state, the GLO is very uniquely positioned as both a mineral and a surface owner in the great state of Texas. Because of that, and because of our fiduciary duty to the public school fund, Commissioner Bush and his predecessors are incentivized and required to maximize returns to the public school fund, or the PSF. Over the years, this has been largely accomplished by encouraging and proactively seeking out opportunities to develop the GLO's mineral interest whenever and wherever possible. Now, I would like to distinguish the fact, and Bill did touch on this earlier, the Texas General Land Office, or GLO, is not a regulatory agency. If you need a permit to drill a well, you go to the Railroad Commission. If there is some kind of environmental incident above the wellhead, a spill, emissions incident, something of that sort, you are required to go to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. You come to the GLO, on the other hand, if you want to lease property from us in order to explore or develop a potential mineral interest. Recently, and as a result of horizontal drilling and fracking, we have recently also updated our lease forms to account for this advent of new technology, which has allowed for a significant amount of exploration of plays that were previously untappable, and also in some instances, re-exploration of plays that heretofore had not been explorable without the advent of horizontal drilling. So just one example of where the state government is trying to be proactive in ensuring that not only does the state maximize the revenues that come back to Texas, but to where we're also helping out our lessees do everything that they think possible, necessary, and advantageous to maximize the revenues that they hope to generate. Now, it probably comes as no surprise, and for anybody here that's had some experience working in Texas, and specifically in the oil and gas industry, we've had our booms, we've had our busts, and a lot of that is obviously due to external factors in the global oil and gas industry. Currently, oil is at approximately $40 a barrel, and this is compared to approximately $100 a barrel this same time last year. Now, despite the drop in gas prices and despite the drop in oil prices, one thing that nobody can deny, and that we should all be very grateful for, is what a game changer horizontal drilling and horizontal fracking has been to the overall oil and gas industry, and not just in Texas and not just in the United States, but globally. You all probably know fracking technology is not new. It's been around for decades, but the advent of horizontal fracking is a new thing and is an entire game changer that has allowed for the development and redevelopment of plays formerly considered unavailable. To briefly touch on the impact to the Texas economy. In short, it's been massive and it's been profound. I like to focus on the area of Texas that Bill also really kind of honed in on, which is the Eagle Ford Shale area. It's a prime example, and while the Permian Basin is also a great example of what horizontal fracking has done for the state of Texas, the Eagle Ford Shale was previously considered absolutely untouchable. And with the advent of horizontal fracking, we've been able to see what has happened in what has largely and longly been considered one of the less economically prosperous parts of Texas see an unbelievable boom. We've seen the increase in tax dollars as a result have greatly benefited schools, roads, infrastructures, private individuals, companies, farmers and ranchers. We've seen restaurants, hotels, condominiums, homes, office buildings go up where previously there had been none. Bill's example of his prior experience doing law work in Cotulla is a prime example. You go to Karnes City. These areas have been absolutely transformed and transformed for the better. We've also seen an increase in jobs, both directly and indirectly related to the oil and gas industry as a result. In short, it's been a wonderful, wonderful boon to the state of Texas, and we feel like we have a very positive story and experience to share with Mexico and with the world, as well as with our fellow states who are trying to explore whether or not they want to enter into this type of oil and gas exploration. Now, I can't deny nobody really enjoys seeing the price fall as it relates to the oil and gas on a per barrel basis. But hopefully and likely it's a temporary drop if history is any indicator. Granted, I have no idea when that's going to change, but hopefully, and we do anticipate that it will rise again. Now, one of the interesting things that does come of the booms and consequently the bust is what the oil and gas industry is capable of doing in terms of really trimming the fat when it feels the squeeze. And we continue to see a desire on behalf of the oil and gas industry to explore and look for new opportunities and technologies that will make the exploration and development of subsurface mineral interests more efficient, more cost-effective, and more responsible. The oil and gas industry, much like the tech industry, has a great record and a great track record of progressive, if not aggressive, technological innovation because its own industry requires it of itself. On the governmental side of things, we are also trying to do the same in order to stay on top of falling oil and gas prices. For example, we used to do hard energy lease bid sales, and if y'all have ever seen what those are, we would hold them at the GLO on often a quarterly basis, and individuals, predominantly from the state of Texas, we'd get several hundred, would send in a sealed bid with a check attached for a piece of property that had been advertised through the GLO. We would set up these long conference tables at our school land board meetings, and we'd have staff staggered placed on either side. And we would begin the agenda by opening up each of these bids individually, and the paper would start getting pushed up and down the conference tables. And at the end, they'd tally up the totals and ultimately present a spreadsheet for the land board to consider to award the highest bids. Well, we recently decided to transition into the 21st century, and we've moved to an online platform called Energetico, which is used in several other states, predominantly in the western part of the United States. And what happened was absolutely amazing. We did this several months ago, and where, like I said, we would only get a couple of hundred sealed bids. We got thousands from around the United States of America, and despite the fact that oil and gas prices have dropped by over 50%, we still garnered over $20 million in sealed bid sales, which is just shy of the same amount that we did the previous year on a per acre basis. So just another example of how state can really help push and advance that technology and other opportunities to maximize revenue, not just to the state, but provide opportunities for individuals and companies to continue to explore and produce in areas where they think we have not fully tapped into that potential. Another thing that I would like to generally tap into and focus on is one that I think requires a little bit more attention, given the fact that Mexico is looking at lessons learned, not just from Texas, but from around the world. The regulatory balance you find yourself striking is going to either promote or hinder any future oil and gas activity in this great country. Please keep that in mind. Texas, we think, has done an extraordinary job of striking a fine balance that helps mitigate risk, protects our assets, protects our environment, but also allows for individuals and companies and the free markets to do what they do best, which is really push the economy, do what's necessary on that front without that unnecessary governmental hindrance. One of the things that we face in Texas on a regular basis is federal overreach, if you will. We're dealing with a number of federal rules right now that has the potential to put a pretty significant damper on what's happening in the oil and gas industry. For example, there's the Waters of the United States rule. The EPA recently issued a rule that could potentially reach up as far as into the Permian Basin, up along the Canadian River, and into various shale plays where if that production and if that exploration impacts or there's a significant nexus to what is otherwise considered a water of the United States, far, far up into these water basins and watersheds, that you have companies that would have to go to the federal government to get permits in order to produce and explore those mineral interests. There's also a methane rule that recently was released that pertains directly to the practice of flaring, which happens oftentimes on natural gas production sites because there's not the necessary available pipeline or infrastructure in order to carry that product away from the pad site. So as a result, and in order to be environmentally friendly and safe, you have to flare that gas. That's one area where EPA is looking to come down and regulate us in a much stricter manner than the state has seen fit and appropriate to do so at this point. As it relates to water, just to piggyback off of what Bill Black said, we have seen that as it relates to oil and gas, it's often demonized in terms of its use and consumption of water. It's definitely very proportionate to the overall statewide water consumption. Agriculture and irrigation is by far the heaviest user, followed second by municipalities. And given how much we derive from the oil and gas industry, considering the fact that their water consumption is very much proportionate with what it is that they're giving back to the state and back to the nation. Again, I think that there is a very healthy balance that has been struck there, and the oil and gas industry does continue to look for opportunities to minimize the amount of water consumption that it uses. Last but not least, fracking has a really good track record. If it's vertical, if it's horizontal, the EPA does not have a single confirmed incident where fracking has contaminated any source of groundwater, and that's not just in Texas, that's across the United States. The pad sites are also smaller, and given the fact that you can have one pad site and send out multiple fracs in various directions, you don't have as many pad sites as you would have in a traditional vertical situation. Consequently, there's a smaller amount of habitat destruction. It's much easier to clean those sites up, to remove them at some point down the road. So from an environmental standpoint, we're also seeing some very positive developments there. In short, and on behalf of Commissioner Bush, Mexico is in a tremendous position to really tap into what has until now been a sea of wealth underneath this country. I certainly encourage y'all to come to the General Land Office to meet with Commissioner Bush. We would love to share our lessons learned, any advice and counsel we may give, and we wish y'all the absolute best going forward as it relates to your exploration in the oil and gas industry. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Ms. Itzel. If you allow me, we have one question from the audience. They ask you, what do you think about the quantity of water that's required for fracking? And can you mention also different resources used in this method, please?
Certainly. I forget, several years ago, the approximate use of statewide water consumption for fracking was approximately 2%. I think that given the amount of production that has gone up since that point in time and thereby stabilized, you're at a slightly higher percentage, but given the amount of money that's coming back to the state as a result, that's entirely proportionate. There have been some other methods that I've heard of to use in lieu of water for fracking, one of which is other types of gels, also propane instead of water, to be used as a proppant. So there are other opportunities. There are other things that the oil and gas industry is looking to use. There's also water recycling. A number of other ways. The oil and gas industry is very sensitive to the amount of water that it consumes because in Texas we like to say that whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. So that is a very hot button topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you allow us, I would like to call also to the stage Mr. Bill Black and Mr. Wallace Pescarini, because Mrs. Fox is going to give you the recognition for being here. Thank you very much. En unos segundos la señora Marta Sagún estará con nosotros para entregar los reconocimientos a nuestros distinguidos panelistas. Señora, gracias. Wallace Pescarini. Bill Black. Jan Itzel. Thank you very much. Gracias, señora. Con esto vamos a hacer un receso. Es tiempo de ir a hacer networking. Aprovechenlo, que sea muy fructífero para todos. Y les tengo un reto. Sé que estamos llenos de gente inteligente, que les gusta el ajedrez. Está con nosotros el maestro Jorge Padilla. Hay unas mesas de ajedrez allá y el maestro reta a 8 personas a echarse un partido de ajedrez. A ver si le pueden ganar. Esos allá adelante, disfruten del día. Estamos en CITEK 2015. A las 12 nos vemos aquí. A las 12 es del regreso, por favor.